When I was 15 and a freshman in high school, I was diagnosed with a number of learning differences. And when I was diagnosed with my hand-eye coordination and dexterity issues, a lot of things made sense. I have always struggled with things like tying shoes or tying knots or anything that has to do with fine motor skills with my hands. Recently, I started wanting to practice my dexterity and getting better with my dexterity issues, and I was trying to think what could be a interesting thing for me to do to work on these dexterity issues while still creating something and doing something fun, and I thought of knitting.
In this video, I'm going to be teaching you how to knit. I'm going to go over all of the basics and keep it pretty simple because, contrary to popular belief, knitting is actually pretty easy.
I think I've been knitting probably around 20 years.
I did a lot of knitting and crocheting when I was a teenager.
So if you count like when I very first started, 2 years, coming up on 3, there was a long break that I wasn't knitting. So seriously and consistently, probably for 1.5 years.
I thought that this might be something that I can practice dexterity without having any high stakes issues.
Getting started, first thing we need to do is we actually need to get the yarn onto the needles in the first place.
Throughout the time that I have been knitting, I've noticed a number of benefits. I've noticed that when I'm tying my shoes, my shoelaces are being tied tighter. I've noticed that it's become easier to make the loops and continue doing rows.
What we're going to do is we need to make a slip knot on the end of this yarn.
I have also noticed how I am being more precise and attentive when I am knitting.
I think I had good dexterity to start with. So I think it does improve your dexterity and concentration.
I would think that that knitting and crochet would really help with your eyes, because you have to really be very careful about, you got to get it into the right hole. And so I guess that's dexterity. You have to take the hook and you have to actually get it into those 2 loops, right? And then if you hook it, you got to actually hook it.
I'm sure it's improved because I do spend a lot of my free time knitting, again, on really small needles where your dexterity is, I think, challenged. So I'm sure, but I'm not sure. I don't know. I haven't thought about that. I'm sure it has, though.
So with this loop, this is actually going to be your first stitch that you put on your needles. So take your needle, put it through the loop that you just made, and if you pull the end of the yarn that's connected to the rest of the yarn, everything should gently tighten, so the loop is going to tighten up on the needle. And you want to just give everything a little bit of a tug so it's nice and snug.
I've noticed throughout this time that it's become easier to knit or tie my shoes without having to think about it. I feel more confident. Those skills are easier. I've also noticed I've started to enjoy it, and it's something that I can just do without thinking about it now. I don't have to think about, okay, what's my next step for this row? What step am I on in this stitch? And when I first started knitting, it was something that I was very much thinking about.
Mental health, 100%. Yeah, it's definitely that thing that I go to. Because I also like to watch YouTube and watch knitting vlogs. It's really corny, but I enjoy them to see what other people are making and what they do in their free time. So for me, it's definitely a way that I can relax and zone out, or even if I have a long meeting where I don't have to be presenting as I usually do in my job, I love to knit there. I also have found it just nice to pick up a hobby because I don't really have any other ones. So it's nice to have something that is just mine that I have.
Because I was just really nervous. And I just feel like it takes your blood pressure down a lot. So it's always fun to have projects that you're working on.
So this first loop is actually going to be the first stitch on our project, and the number of stitches that we put on this first needle is going to determine the width of whatever it is you're knitting.
I was knitting you a scarf, actually. I don't know if your mom told you.
I started making doll blankets. So I started by making doll blankets for Mari. So like I made the doll blankets because I had sort of leftover yarn for this, from that, from the other, but not enough to make a big blanket, right? So I thought, I'll use the leftovers and I'll make these little doll blankets. So I kind of made a lot of them. I have to weave in the ends, or crocheter alive that likes weaving in ends. It's the bane of our existence. We hate weaving in ends.
So I knit a sweater for Amstel, and that was my most fun project. It was harder than I thought, but it came out really good.
To cast on more stitches, you don't need to make another slip knot. It's actually much easier than that. All you have to do is make more loops, and we're going to put those loops onto this needle.
I have noticed that knitting not only helps with my dexterity, but also helps with my mental health. I have realized that I've tended to pick up my knitting when I'm in times of anxiety or times of worse mental health. I've also realized that yes, knitting has affected my dexterity in a positive way, but it's also something that I really enjoy. I feel like knitting is something that I'm going to continue doing over my lifetime, even if it's not something I am doing every day.
So to get more stitches onto the needle, what we're going to do is just gently wrap the yarn around your index finger like this. And what we're going to do with this loop is we're going to slip it onto this needle, or we're going to use the needle and scoop the loop off of our finger. So you have the yarn, you kind of turn it a little bit so it creates a loop, and then just take the needle and scoop the loop up through the bottom and pull it off like this. And then just kind of gently pull it tight, not too tight. You just want it to be snug on the needle.
I've enjoyed making hats because they're kind of quick.
There's a sweater that I want to make that has like some distressing detail on it. It's inspired by a very expensive sweater that I will not be buying, but I would love to make it on my own. I'm still not sure how to do it, but I would love to like figure that out and make that sweater. I think it'd be cool.
Now that I've mastered a cable, I'd like to be able to knit sweaters, and each of my attempts at doing it by myself has been unsuccessful. So I need to take a class.
So to do that again, you just wrap the yarn around your left index finger, take the needle, come up through the bottom and scoop the loop off onto the needle. Once you have the number of stitches casted on that you want, what we're going to do is we're going to turn the needle around just like this, so we're on the back side of it.
So it's definitely something that I want to continue talking to them about, and I think it's something that I'm going to encourage friends to do.
So this is the most complicated part, but this is the bread and butter of knitting too. So take your second needle that we have, and right away we're gonna get into this first loop or this first stitch. Slide the stitch up to the end of the needle. We're going to take the second needle and take it through this loop, up through the back side of the left-handed needle. So take your needle and put it to the left side of this first stitch and scoop it through the loop along the back side of the left needle, just like this. And then once you have that X, you're going to take the yarn and we're going to loop it around the back right needle, just like this. So slip it around the back right needle that's along the back side and pull it not too tight, but give it a nice little tug. And it's going to be pulled between these two needles. So between the X, it's going to come up through the middle of them, come down here like through the bottom. And then You're gonna take the right needle, the one that's in the right hand, we're gonna come down and scoop off this remaining loop. So come down through the loop, come up along the left side like this, and pull it off the left needle completely.
So this project and this process has not only benefited my dexterity and my hand-eye coordination and given me confidence in tying knots, but it's also helped me with my anxiety, and it's given me a new hobby to do.